I came home to an empty house. The moment I stepped through the door, I felt it. Something was wrong. The air was stale, too still, like life had been sucked out of the walls. My boots echoed on the hardwood floor as I walked in, glancing around. The living room was untouched, but there was a strange absence, an absence of clutter, of warmth, of things that belonged to her. I turned the corner into the bedroom. The closet door was wide open, half empty. My stomach dropped. Kimberly was gone. I yanked open drawers. Hers were empty. The bathroom counter, usually littered with expensive skincare products I never understood the price of, was wiped clean. The jewelry box I bought her for our anniversary was sitting there, open, abandoned, ransacked. The only thing left was my wedding ring, the one she made me stop wearing because it wasn't stylish. I gripped the edge of the dresser, my knuckles turning white. Then I saw it. An envelope. Propped up against the lamp on my nightstand, my name scribbled in her handwriting. With every step toward it, my pulse pounded harder. I snatched it up, tore it open, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Travis, I had to leave. Things just aren't working between us anymore, and I need to do what's best for me. I know this is sudden, but I hope one day you'll understand. Please take care of Mason. He's better off with you right now. And there's something else. I know you'll be upset, but please, please don't be mad. I didn't mean for things to turn out this way, but there are some financial issues that I couldn't fix. The business had a rough year, and I had to take out some loans. It just got out of control. I know you're responsible, and I trust you to figure it out. You always do. I have to go now. Please don't try to find me. Goodbye, Kimberly. My hands clenched the paper so tightly it crumpled. My chest burned. My ears rang. This wasn't happening. I stormed into her office, yanking open drawers, rifling through cabinets. Bills. Statements. Overdue notices. Red stamp screaming final notice, default imminent, debt collection pending. My eyes scanned the numbers. 20,000. 50,000. 80. 100. It didn't stop. The final total? Over $400,000. My knees nearly buckled. She had buried us alive in debt and then ran away. And she left our son behind. I didn't even realize Mason was standing in the doorway until I heard his small voice. Dad? I turned. My boy, 10 years old. His messy brown hair stuck up in the back, his Star Wars pajamas wrinkled from sleep. His face, so much like mine, was scrunched in confusion, his blue eyes filled with something I recognized all too well. Fear. I forced myself to breathe. I knelt down. Hey, buddy, I said, keeping my voice steady. It's okay. Where's Mom? I swallowed the lump in my throat. She had to go somewhere. He looked at me for a long time. Too long. Then he just nodded. That's when I knew. He wasn't surprised. He'd seen it coming. Maybe we both had. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind played back the same scenes like a broken film reel: Kimberly's empty closet, her crumpled letter, the monstrous pile of debt she dumped on me like a ticking time bomb. At some point, I must have dozed off, but I woke up to the sound of something shuffling outside my bedroom door. My senses sharpened instantly. I wasn't used to waking up alone in this house. Mason. I found him sitting on the floor of the hallway, cross-legged, a flashlight in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. His face was scrunched in deep concentration, eyebrows furrowed in a way that made him look older than 10. He didn't even notice me until I crouched beside him. What are you doing, bud? He looked up, blinking. Then he held up one of the papers. Mom's business stuff, he said. I found it in the office. I frowned and took the page from him. It was a contract. Not just any contract, a loan agreement. Signed. Witnessed. And Jesus Christ, exclusively under Kimberly's name. My pulse spiked. I snatched another paper from the pile. Same thing. And another. And another. It wasn't just a few small loans. It was everything. The entire house of cards she'd built, every dollar she stole from our future, it was all in her name. Not mine. Not legally tied to me in any way. My hands were shaking. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I'd assumed, I'd been sure, that she'd somehow roped me into this. that I'd be the one left to drown in her financial disaster. But no, she must have thought she was being smart. She probably planned to drag me down anyway, manipulate me into taking responsibility once she was gone. Maybe she even thought I'd feel guilty enough to pay it off for her. That was never going to happen. Mason watched me closely. I forced myself to breathe. Where did you find these? In the back of the filing cabinet, he said simply. Mom thought I didn't see when she put them there last month. I stared at him. And why are you looking through them now? His lips pressed together in that stubborn way he got when he didn't want to admit something. But then he straightened his back and said, because I want to help. A lump formed in my throat. This kid, my kid, 10 years old, and already more reliable than the woman who gave birth to him. I swallowed hard. You did good, buddy, I said, ruffling his hair. You did real good. I stood up, gripping the documents so tightly they crinkled under my fingers. My mind was racing. Kimberly thought she got away clean. She thought I'd be left in ruins, buried under the weight of her debt, while she skipped off into the sunset with whatever dirtbag was dumb enough to take her in. But she had no idea what was coming, and I wasn't going to stop it. I was just going to sit back and watch. The next morning, I did what I always did. I got up, made coffee, and went to work. Routine. Stability. It was the only thing keeping me from losing my mind. At the job site, I moved on autopilot, rewiring an old fuse box while my crew shot the breeze about their weekends. I wasn't listening. My mind was stuck on one thing. Kimberly's debt wasn't my problem. That fact alone should have been a relief. But it wasn't, because it meant one thing. Whoever she ran to was about to find out exactly what she brought with her. And sure enough, it didn't take long. I was halfway through lunch when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I knew exactly who it was before I even answered. I let it ring twice, then picked up. Yeah. There was silence. A shaky breath. Then, Travis. Her voice. I felt an odd sense of detachment, like I was hearing her from the other end of a long tunnel. Kimberly. I took a slow bite of my sandwich, chewed. What a surprise. Travis, listen. Her voice was strained, panicked, desperate. Something's wrong with my bank account. I didn't answer. They froze it. She sucked in a ragged breath. Everything. My personal checking, my savings. Travis, I can't access any of it. There's some kind of a hold on all my funds. I don't understand. Oh, there it was. I leaned back in my seat, watching my crew joke around a few tables away. I could almost see her in my mind, probably pacing in some cheap motel, her hair a mess, her nails bitten down, realizing in real time that the world wasn't going to let her just walk away. I let the silence stretch just long enough for her to feel it. Then I said, Huh, that's all you have to say. Her voice shot up an octave. Travis, my credit cards aren't working. I tried to use Greg's, but I smiled. There it was. Greg. I bet he was standing right next to her, arms crossed, just now realizing he'd picked up a ticking time bomb. I don't know what to tell you, Kim, I said, wiping my hands on a napkin. Maybe it's just a temporary financial difficulty. Silence. The same words she used on me in that letter. The realization hit her like a brick. I heard it in the way her breath hitched. You knew. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. You did something, she accused, her voice shrill now. This is you, isn't it? You set me up. You. I laughed. Just a quiet chuckle, but it was enough to make her stop cold. Kimberly, I said slowly, savoring this, letting it sink in. I didn't do anything. You did. You signed every single one of those loan agreements. You maxed out those credit cards. You built your little empire on borrowed money, and now the bill is due. No, she choked out. No, you don't understand, Travis, But I wasn't listening anymore. I glanced at the time. Lunch break was almost over. I had actual responsibilities, unlike her. So I let out a satisfied sigh, leaned forward, and said, Good luck, Kim. Then I hung up, and I got back to work. I expected her to call back immediately. Maybe scream, cry, threaten. But she didn't. Not for the rest of the day. Not that night. Instead, the next time I heard from her, It wasn't a call. It was a text. A single, pathetic, desperate message. Travis, please. I need to talk to you. It's serious. I smirked. Oh, I bet it was. I ignored it. The next morning, while I was making breakfast, Mason padded into the kitchen, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He climbed onto his stool, watching me flip pancakes. Then, casually, he asked, "Did Mom call?" I raised an eyebrow. "Why would you ask that?" He just shrugged. "She always calls when she's in trouble." That stopped me cold. I turned to look at him, really look at him. His face was calm, but his fingers drummed lightly against the counter. He knew. He might have been 10, but Mason was smart, too smart. He saw right through his mother, through her games, her tricks, her crocodile tears. And that's when it hit me, he wasn't worried about her. He was waiting to see if I would cave, if I would let her weasel her way back in. I put the spatula down and leaned against the counter. "Mason," I said carefully, "how do you feel about all of this?" He stared at me for a second. Then he took a deep breath, pushed his plate aside, and said, "I think she's scared." I nodded. "Yeah, she probably is." He tilted his head. "Are you going to help her?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked around the counter, sat down next to him, and placed my hand on his shoulder. "No," I said. "I'm not." His face didn't change. He just nodded. "Good." I squeezed his shoulder. Then I picked up the syrup and poured it over his pancakes. "Eat up, bud." I went to work, kept my head down, and ignored my phone. By mid-afternoon, I had 6 missed calls. 3 from Kimberly. 3 from an unknown number. The voicemail from the unknown number confirmed my suspicion. Greg. His voice was tight, forced, but I could hear the barely contained panic beneath the fake calm. Travis. "Hey, man. Listen, I think we need to talk. I don't know what's going on with Kim's finances, but there's some serious stuff happening over here. Banks freezing accounts, debt collectors calling my place. Yeah, they somehow got my address. You get what I'm saying? This is a mess, man. I don't know what Kim told you, but we need to figure this out. Call me back." I didn't. I was grinning when I deleted the voicemail. By the time I got home, Mason was on the couch, flipping through a comic book. He barely looked up as I tossed my keys onto the counter. "Mom called again," he said. I snorted. "Oh yeah. She said she needed to see you. Urgently." "Of course she did." Mason flipped a page. "She's coming over." I stopped. "What?" "She said she'd be here soon." He glanced up, his expression unreadable. I didn't tell her she could. A slow, satisfied smile spread across my face. Oh, this was gonna be good. I didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour after Mason's warning, I heard the screech of tires outside. A car door slammed. Then, bang, bang, bang. Kimberly was on my front porch. I took my time, finished my beer, set it down. Then, with deliberate slowness, I walked to the door and pulled it open. And there she was. She looked like hell. Her perfectly styled hair was a mess, dark circles smudged under her eyes, and her designer blouse was wrinkled, like she'd been wearing it for days. She clutched her phone in one hand, her knuckles white, and when she saw me, her lips trembled before she plastered on a fake, watery smile. "Travis," she breathed, her voice dripping with desperation. "Thank God." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Kim." She stepped forward like she was about to walk inside. I didn't move, didn't budge an inch. She stopped. Her eyes darted behind me, probably looking for Mason, but he wasn't in sight. Smart kid. I just need a minute," she stammered. "Please." I said nothing. She let out a shaky breath and ran a hand through her hair. "Travis, I know you're mad." "I'm not mad." She blinked. You're not." "No." I tilted my head. "I'm done." That hit her like a slap. I saw the moment the reality set in. She wasn't here to fix things. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here because her backup plan had blown up in her face, and she was out of options. "Travis, listen," she rushed, voice high and pleading. I made mistakes, okay? But we can fix this. We can figure it out together." I let out a low chuckle. She flinched. "Together?" I repeated. Kim, you cleaned out your stuff, left me a letter, and ran off with another man. You didn't leave me. You abandoned me and our son. And now you want to talk about fixing things. She swallowed hard. I wasn't thinking straight. No, I cut in. You were thinking about yourself. Like you always do. Her breath hitched. I just need help, Travis, please. The banks. You mean your banks, I corrected. Your accounts. Your debt. I stepped forward, voice calm, measured. I read every loan agreement, Kim. You signed them. Not me. She paled. I took another step forward. You thought you could dump it all on me, didn't you? I murmured. You thought I'd roll over and take it. That I'd clean up your mess. I tilted my head. Tell me, did Greg know about the debt before you ran to him? She bit her lip, avoiding my gaze. I smirked. Didn't think so. Tears welled in her eyes. Travis, please. But before she could say another word, a second car pulled up behind hers. A sleek black sedan. The doors swung open, and two men in suits stepped out. Kimberly's face drained of color. And just like that, I knew exactly who they were. The debt collectors had found her. Kimberly's breath hitched as she saw the two men approaching. She stumbled back a step, her eyes darting between them and me, like I was supposed to do something. Like I was supposed to save her. I didn't move. The men were professionals, suits crisp, expressions neutral, but their presence alone radiated authority. The taller one, a broad-shouldered guy with a neatly trimmed beard, pulled out a folder and flipped it open. Mrs. Carter? His voice was calm. Too calm. Kimberly's lips parted, but no sound came out. The other man, shorter but stockier, took a step forward. We've been trying to reach you regarding your outstanding debts. He pulled out a piece of paper, unfolded it, and read from it. Total balance owed, $412,862.53. He looked up. You've defaulted on multiple loans, and your accounts have been frozen per court order. We're here to discuss repayment. Kimberly let out a strangled noise. I don't have that kind of money right now. The taller man nodded, completely unfazed. That's understandable. However, you did list a co-signer for one of your business loans. He glanced at the paper. Gregory. Parker. Kimberly's face shattered. I didn't even try to hide my smirk. Oh, I said, my voice light with amusement. That's interesting. Kimberly turned to me, so fast her hair whipped around her shoulders. Travis, please. Her voice cracked. I didn't mean for this to happen. I arched an eyebrow. You didn't mean to take out hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans. I'd scared. That's some real bad luck, Kim. One of the men cleared his throat. Mr. Parker has also been informed of his financial responsibility, he said smoothly. We contacted him earlier today. Kimberly's breath hitched. What did he say? The shorter guy shrugged. Didn't seem thrilled. I laughed. I couldn't help it. I could see it. Greg's arrogant smirk melting into sheer horror when he realized the hot, exciting new life he signed up for came with nearly $500,000 in debt. Kimberly's chest rose and fell in short, panicked breaths. This is a mistake, she whispered. There has to be something we can do. The taller man smiled. There is. We can discuss immediate payment plans or liquidation of assets. His eyes flickered toward her car. Would you like to start there? Her whole body jerked. You can't take my car. The man tapped his folder. It's in your name, Mrs. Carter. And based on these records, your lease payments have been inconsistent. Kimberly turned back to me, full panic setting in now. Travis, she gasped, her hands trembling. Please, just loan me something to get back on my feet. You don't have to pay it all, just help me. For Mason. For our family. And there it was. The last, desperate play. Pulling the family card. I stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, I exhaled, shaking my head. There's no us, Kim, I said. Not anymore. Her face crumpled. I didn't care. I turned, walked to the door, and shut it in her face. Through the window, I watched as she stood there, frozen in disbelief. while the men continued speaking to her, unfazed. Eventually, they escorted her to her car. She sobbed as she handed over the keys. And I just stood there, watching, letting it all unfold. The house was quiet after I shut the door. Mason sat on the couch, flipping through his comic book like nothing had happened. But I knew better. He was listening. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and took a slow sip. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt nothing. That surprised me. After everything Kimberly had done, the lies, the debt, the manipulation, I thought I'd feel some kind of satisfaction watching her world crumble. Maybe a sense of justice. But all I felt was done. I turned to Mason. "You okay?" He nodded, not looking up from his comic. "Yeah." I leaned against the counter. "You heard all that?" "Yeah." He flipped another page. "They took Mom's car." I watched him carefully. "How do you feel about that?" He shrugged. "I dunno." Then, after a pause, he said, "She kinda deserved it." I let out a breath. "Yeah, bud. She kinda did." Silence. Then Mason set the comic down, propped his chin on his hand, and said, "Greg's probably freaking out." I laughed. Really laughed. A deep, full-bodied sound that I hadn't let out in a long time. "You think so?" I asked, smirking. Mason grinned. "Definitely." I walked over, ruffled his hair, then grabbed the remote and tossed it to him. "Pick a movie," I said. "Your choice." He gasped dramatically. "Anything. Anything." He flipped through the options like he was making the most important decision of his life. I sat down next to him, stretching my legs, letting the tension from the last few days finally bleed out of me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt light. The next morning, I woke up feeling good. Not just okay. Good. The weight on my chest was gone. The constant dread that had been sitting in my stomach ever since Kimberly ran off had disappeared. Mason was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop. When I walked in, he looked up and smiled. "Morning, Dad." "Morning, Bud." I poured myself some coffee. "What you doing?" He turned the laptop toward me. "Kimberly's Beauty Salon." Or rather, the auction listing for Kimberly's Beauty Salon. I raised an eyebrow. "How'd you find this?" He shrugged. "I just looked up her business name." I scanned the listing. The shop, the equipment, everything was being liquidated. It wasn't worth much, maybe a drop in the ocean of what she owed, but it was another nail in the coffin. And then I saw it. At the bottom of the page, under previous owner, was her full name. And her new address. I stared. Mason grinned. "Guess she didn't think about that." I let out a low whistle. "She's not gonna like that." He snorted. "Nope." I clicked my tongue. "And you just happened to stumble across this?" Mason's eyes twinkled with mischief. "I was just looking around." "Uh-huh." I ruffled his hair. "Remind me to never get on your bad side." He beamed. "Too late." I laughed, shaking my head. "All right, kid. You hungry?" "Starving." I grabbed some eggs from the fridge, a feeling of complete peace settling over me. Kimberly thought she could run. Thought she could take what she wanted and leave me holding the bag. But life had other plans. And something told me she wasn't done paying for her mistakes yet. It took exactly 3 days for Kimberly to call again. This time it was worse. I was in the garage, fixing a faulty outlet, when my phone buzzed on the workbench. I glanced at the screen. Her name. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something in me wanted to hear just how bad things had gotten. So I wiped my hands, picked up the phone, and put it on speaker. The first thing I heard was sobbing. "Travis, please," she wailed. "You have to help me. I don't know what to do." I leaned against the workbench, watching the afternoon light stream through the garage window. "What's wrong, Kim?" I asked, my voice calm. "They found me." "Oh." I smirked. She sniffled, her breathing ragged. "Some guy knocked on my door last night. I don't even know how he got my address. But he was waiting for me, Travis. He had my name, my loan statements, everything. I had to sneak out the back. I don't even know where to go." I said nothing. She kept going. "And Greg," her voice broke. "Greg left. He threw me out, Travis. Said he wasn't dealing with my mess. Took his car, his money, everything. I'm staying in a motel, but I can't even use my cards. I have nothing. Travis, please. I let the silence stretch. Then, finally, I sighed. Well, I said, sounds like you've had a rough couple of days. She let out a strangled laugh, completely unhinged. You think? I chuckled. You know, Kim, this is funny. Really funny. Because 3 days ago, I also had nothing. No wife, no explanation, just a damn letter telling me to figure it out. That was different, she snapped. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Her breath hitched. I pushed off the workbench, pacing the garage. And you made yours. You spent years treating me like an ATM, bleeding me dry for every stupid thing you wanted. When you ran out of my money, you stole someone else's. And when it got too much to handle, you ran. Travis, But the thing is, Kim, I continued, my voice steady. You didn't just leave. You tried to take me down with you. Silence. And then, in a whisper, I just wanted to be happy. I laughed. Yeah? And how's that working out for you? Her breathing was shaky. She was losing it. Please, she croaked. I have nowhere to go. I can't even get a job because my accounts are frozen, my credit's destroyed. I have nothing. I closed my eyes, savoring this. The moment she finally realized she had burned every bridge. I have Mason, I said simply. And that's all I need. She let out a choked sob. Can I at least? Goodbye, Kim. Wait, Travis, don't. Click. I set my phone down, exhaled, and let the quiet settle around me. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt completely free. The next few days passed in peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next disaster Kimberly would bring into my life. The house felt lighter. The silence wasn't suffocating, it was calm. Mason was happier too. I could see it in the way he carried himself, in the way he laughed more, slept better. We were good. And then on the fourth night, there was a knock at the door. Not a normal knock. Slow, deliberate, heavy. I set down my beer and exchanged a look with Mason. His comic book lay open on the couch beside him, but his eyes were sharp, watching me closely. I stood up, walked to the door, and pulled it open. Greg. He looked like hell. His expensive button-up was wrinkled, his normally slicked-back hair was disheveled, and there was a tightness in his jaw that hadn't been there before. I crossed my arms. Can I help you? He let out a slow breath, shoving his hands into his pockets. Look, man, he said. I don't want trouble. I raised an eyebrow. Then why are you on my porch? He rolled his shoulders, looking away for a second before locking eyes with me again. I need to know. His voice was tense, like he was forcing the words out. Did you set this up? I blinked. Set what up? He let out a bitter laugh. Oh, come on, Travis. The debt. The collectors. The complete financial collapse of Kimberly's life. He shook his head. She swears you had something to do with it. I smirked. Kimberly's a liar. He scoffed. Yeah, no kidding. Silence stretched between us. Then, finally, he muttered, she said she didn't have much debt. I exhaled sharply through my nose. And you believed her? His jaw tightened. She made it sound like a small problem. Something temporary. I tilted my head. And now you know the truth. Greg rubbed a hand over his face. Yeah, now I do. I studied him for a moment. She ran to you, didn't she? He let out a dry chuckle. Oh, yeah. Showed up crying, begging for help. But as soon as I saw the letters piling up, creditors, banks, lawsuits, I knew she was dragging me down with her. He shook his head, scowling. I kicked her out. I nodded. Smart. He stared at me, something dark flickering in his eyes. I don't think she has anywhere left to go. Not my problem. He let out a sharp laugh. Yeah, guess not. He took a step back. Well, for what it's worth. I respect it. I frowned. Respect what? The way you played it. He smirked, but it was hollow. You didn't have to lift a finger. You just let her destroy herself. I shrugged. Actions have consequences. Greg huffed. Yeah, I learned that the hard way. He turned and walked back to his car. I didn't stop him. As I watched him drive off, I couldn't help but think, yeah, Kimberly had run out of people to use. And now? She was truly alone. 2 days passed without a word from Kimberly. I figured she was out of moves. Greg had dumped her. The banks had shut her out, and the debt collectors weren't going anywhere. The only thing left for her to do was disappear. And honestly, that was fine by me. But then, on the third night, I woke up to the sound of someone banging on my front door. I sat up instantly. My heart pounded, my senses sharp. Not a normal knock. This was desperate, erratic, wild. From down the hall, Mason's bedroom door creaked open. "Dad," his voice was groggy. "Stay there, bud," I said, already swinging my legs out of bed. I grabbed the baseball bat from under my nightstand, made my way down the hall, and peeked through the window. Kimberly, barefoot, hair a mess. Her coat was soaking wet, clinging to her like she'd been walking in the rain for hours. I exhaled slowly, feeling nothing but disgust. Another sharp bang. "Travis, open the door." I didn't move. "Travis, please. I need help." I counted the seconds in my head. 5, 10, 15. Then I unlocked the door and pulled it open just an inch. She lurched forward, trying to push her way in. But I was ready. I planted my foot and held firm. She blinked up at me, soaked, shaking, broken. "Please," she croaked. Just let me inside." I stared at her. This woman, this selfish, manipulative, lying woman who had spent years draining me dry, taking everything she could, then dumping her mess on me before running off with another man. And now, she had nothing left. "I have nowhere to go," she whispered, her voice cracking. "No money, no place to sleep. Please, Travis." I tilted my head. "Where's Greg?" She let out a wet, bitter laugh. "Gone." "Where's your fancy car?" "They took it." "Your salon?" "Sold off." I raised an eyebrow. Sounds like a temporary financial difficulty. Her entire body sagged. "Travis," she whispered, real tears falling now. "I'm so sorry. I made mistakes. I was selfish. But I need you. Please, just let me stay for a few days. Just until I can figure something out." I took a slow breath. "You mean like how you left me to figure something out?" She flinched. Then I did something she didn't expect. I stepped aside. Her breath hitched. I can come in." I nodded. "Just one thing first." She blinked. I pointed down the hall, to Mason's room. "Go tell your son why you left." Her entire face crumbled. I waited. She didn't move. And that was all the answer I needed. Without another word, I stepped forward, gripped the edge of the door, and slammed it in her face. Her muffled sobs echoed through the wood. I locked the door, turned, walked back down the hall. Mason stood in the doorway of his room, silent. I met his gaze. "You okay?" He nodded. "Yeah." Then, after a pause, "Did she leave?" I nodded. "She's got nowhere else to go." Mason didn't say anything for a long time. Then, softly, he whispered, "Good." I ruffled his hair. "Get some sleep, bud." He nodded again and disappeared into his room. I stood there in the hallway for a long time. Then I went back to bed and slept better than I had in years. A week passed. No more calls. No more knocks at the door. Kimberly was gone. I didn't know where she ended up, and I didn't care. She had spent years making herself my problem, and now she was someone else's burden. Mason and I settled into our new normal. Mornings were quiet but peaceful. No tension. No fights over money. No cold stares from across the kitchen table. Just me and my son, eating breakfast, planning our days, and actually enjoying life again. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Mason spoke up. "So, is she ever coming back?" I took a sip of my beer, considering my words carefully. "She might try," I said honestly, "but she won't get through the door." He thought about that for a moment, then nodded. "Good." I smirked. "You like things better this way?" He shrugged, but I can see it in his face. The relief. The peace. "It's just easier." Yeah, it was. A part of me wished I had seen the truth about Kimberly sooner. But another part of me, the stronger part, realized it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was this: me and Mason. A fresh start. No more lies. No more manipulation. No more Kimberly. I leaned back, stretching my arms. You ever want to talk about any of this, Bud? You can. He smiled a little. I know. I reached over, ruffled his hair, and grabbed the remote. Now pick something better than this, I said, motioning at the terrible action movie he had chosen. I swear, you got no taste in movies. He gasped. Take that back. Not a chance. He laughed, and for the first time in a long time, it wasn't forced. It wasn't strained. It was real. And as I sat there, watching him scroll through the movie options, I realized something. Kimberly had spent her life chasing happiness, and somehow she was the only one who never found it.